Recording's fine.
All right.
Okay, you're recording now.
Cool. Thank you, Carrie. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to kind of get rolling, and anyone else who joins can go ahead and join as they please. My name is Kate DeForest. For those whom I've not met, I don't know. Welcome. We are going to do things a little bit differently for this presentation. Oh, I have to get my PowerPoint up and ready to go. Rather than doing the typical just sharing your slides and talking through things, I'm not going to go into presenter mode in PowerPoint, but we are going to walk through this template. Now that I've said that, I'm also going to share a link with you that I have to grab. Oh, I thought I had this all set up. Okay. Back over here. Now we're going to go to the chat. Okay. In the chat, I am putting a link for the communications and marketing page. It's a toolkit page, and there are branded downloads, and this PowerPoint is on that page. So everyone is welcome to go and download your own version, grab that. This PowerPoint template is all created with the visual identity and brand standards for Oswego. We've also built in a lot of accessibility features. So the point of it, or the point that we hope to get across with this, is that everybody can use this fairly easily and still hold accessibility in your PowerPoints. Now, I will also mention the accessibility features are important in this sense when you are sharing PowerPoints with other people to look, like emailing it or sharing it with others. In a virtual setting, these features are a little bit different. That's like a completely separate topic. So this is intended if you are emailing a PowerPoint, a slide deck to someone, and they are looking at it on their own computer, these accessibility features will be valuable to them. How many of you are familiar with accessibility? Okay. Maddie and Doran, I can't see you, and that's okay. You don't need to have your cameras on. I do tend to ask a lot of like engagement questions, so feel free to use the chat or just kind of pop your camera on and raise your hand or whatever if you want to. It's kind of informal, but. And also, I will say, as I'm going through things, feel free to unmute yourself and just kind of pop in and ask a question if you feel the need as well. Okay, so a little bit familiar, slightly familiar. All right, we're going to go over some of the basics of how to, as I mentioned, how to create more accessible PowerPoints. And if you have any questions about what anything means, as I just mentioned, feel free to chime in and ask, and I'll clarify. In this template, the first 5 or 6 slides are just sort of informational. Also in this template, there is a lot of information that is down in the speaker notes area. So that kind of explains, there's nothing in this particular slide, but in the speaker notes and future slides, it kind of gives you step by step as to how to implement a lot of these things. Obviously, if you're using this to create your own PowerPoint and share with others, we recommend you delete everything. However, we also recommend that you save this template so you can make copies of it and keep these instructions for yourself until you get really used to them, so you can go back and refer to them. To save this template, once you download it, you simply come way up to the very top into File and then select the Save As option. That will bring up your own local computer and you can rename it, save it wherever you would like, and then you have that master copy that you can go back and use. Slide number 3 just kind of overviews what I just said. This is all about creating accessible templates. There is a link to the visual identity and brand standards that has all of the specific fonts and colors and all that for Oswego. So we recommend, please don't change any of the colors. You can use different fonts, but as I said, this is all sort of in line with that visual identity. All right, slide number 4, just again kind of reiterates what I've been saying. These first few slides are for informational purposes only. Slide number 5 gives you instructions on how to download the Roboto font, which is what is recommended in the visual identity standards. And then a question for the group, is anyone familiar with master slides in PowerPoint? Has anyone used master slides before? No, I'm seeing a no. Okay. All right. Master slides are super cool because basically it controls everything within the slide deck. So when you're building a slide deck, instead of going into each individual slide and changing the font size or the color of something, you can go into the master slides and have it changed for the entire, well, for that particular slide layout. So I will, let's see, I'll show you that real quick. So from the main navigation ribbon, we are going to go to View, and then there's an option sort of in the middle-ish that says Slide Master, and we're going to open that. And this now on the left-hand side are all of the master templates for each of the individual slides. So for this top slide, if we select, we're going to select that slide, the text box. We're going to come back to the Home tab. Now we're going to change this to something really obnoxious so we can see the change. We're going to make it purple. No, I don't like that. We're going to make it red. It's a little bit better. And we'll change the font. Okay, we'll use this. No, I don't like that either. I want something really obnoxious. All right, Apple Chancery is what we're using, which is not accessible. Don't use that font, but we're changing it just for demonstration purposes. And then let's see, we'll make it a little bit bigger as well. Okay, so we've obviously modified that font. And as we click down through some of these other slides, so this other like secondary slide, we can see the font has also been modified, even though I only changed it on that top slide. So it will be reflected in many of the subsequent slides. So as you may be able to ascertain from this exercise, this can save you a lot of time and energy instead of going through each individual slide and changing the font size or whatever so it's matches. You can just do it on the master slide and it changes it in each instance that that slide is used. So if we come back to the Slide Master tab in the very top and then select Close Master, that will bring us back out to our regular slide deck. And as we can see in all of these, slide 2 through 7, all of those titles have now been changed. Amazing. Yes, it's super fun. You do have to be a little bit careful depending on what it is that you make or what it is that you change. And I have found that, all right, we're going to go back into Slide Master here real quick. Some of the slide layouts, oh, that one did change. Okay, some of the slide layouts will not reflect somehow, and I really can't explain that. If you change something on this very top master slide, it theoretically is supposed to change it for all of the subsequent slides. All right, there was a question. Do changes made in Slide Master and PowerPoint remain if the deck is converted to Google Slides? That is a great question. I don't have a specific answer for that, but I do believe if we were to upload this particular deck to Google Slides, I think it would stay. PowerPoint remain if the deck isn't. Yeah, so when you save, all right, first of all, we come to the Slide Master tab. We select Close Master. Now we have to save this deck. So I'm going to save as. We're just going to call it test, and I'll figure out where that is later because I probably won't be able to remember. Okay.
The reason I ask, it's Carlo. I do a lot of work in PowerPoint because I really like the kind of features to change the slide layout.
Yep.
the animation and all, but then I realized I put all this work in, and then when I upload it to my Google Drive, the animation, some of the other things do not remain once I open it as a Google slide deck. So it's kind of a real inconvenience.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I do a lot of my work in PowerPoint as well. But then if I'm sharing it out with others, I will upload it into Google Slides. So it's easier for people to get the link. So I hear you. I think animations and all that aside, I think if we were to upload this deck as it is into Google Slides, I believe that the font would stay. The only question would be if you use some funky font like I did, and that font is not available in Google Slides or in Google, it may revert it to like some default that Google has set. So it may not look exactly the way that you want it to look. Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. So, all right, without spending a whole lot of time on master slides, that's the basic premise of it. I would recommend if you've never used master slides before, take any PowerPoint deck that you have, just create yourself a test deck and go in. It's in the view tab and then master slides, and you can go in and play with it and see how it reflects changes in the deck itself. So, yeah, super fun, saves a lot of time. It's really awesome. All right, slide number 7 in this deck just has an email and website. The email is accessibilitypractices@oswego.edu. And the website is oswego.edu/accessibility for our digital accessibility website. There are tutorials in there which kind of goes through some of these same steps for PowerPoint. All right, also on slide 7 in the slide notes, it kind of has a checklist of what various slides throughout this deck sort of highlight. There's a lot of repeated information in here. So as you go through this, if you download it, you'll notice that in the slide notes section, there's a lot of like just reiteration. So every slide within the deck needs to have a unique title. This helps for screen reader purposes. People using screen readers can better identify where they are within the deck if each slide has a unique title. So for example, sometimes you have a lot of information on a slide and you want to kind of, or you have multiple slides that have related information and they'll have the same title. You want to identify different slides by adding like a 1 or a 2 or, continued or something, some sort of differentiation between the different slide titles. Is everyone familiar with the concept of alt text or text equivalents? Okay, alt text, yes, thank you. Alt text is basically just a very brief text description of any images that are within your slide deck. So we're not really going to touch on animations. Carlo, to your point, I don't deal a lot with animations, so I'm not going to talk about that. But if that's something that you would be interested in diving into further, I'd be happy to connect with you, after the fact and go through some of that. For images, every image that's in the deck needs to have some sort of very brief text description. So if we click on the image, we can highlight it. And then if we right click down in about the middle of the options menu, we have view alt text. If we open that up, I got too many things in my way. If we open that up, now we can come over here on the right-hand sidebar and we have this little text box, dialog box. There is a button that says mark as decorative. If your image basically has no purpose, has no meaning, it's just filler, then you can select this button and mark the image as decorative, which basically allows screen readers to completely skip it. If it has some sort of purpose, if it has a meaning, if you want to enter some kind of description, then you would just type in a very brief, like 1 sentence overview of what is in the picture. What purpose, what meaning is that picture trying to portray? All right. Now, this slide deck has lots of images already in it. If you want to switch them out, obviously, you may not want everything that we have in here. Just highlight the picture and right click again. And then up near the top, you can select change picture. PowerPoint does have a lot of really cool icons. You might not want to use an icon for a picture this big, but there's a couple of different options here. If you have pictures in your computer that you want to upload, you can just select from a file, and that will bring up your own local computer that you can then navigate through and select and upload a new image. All right, adding alt text. We talked about making it decorative. There's also, I just highlighted the picture again, so I have the alt text panel up. We have this generate alt text for me button. That's just for kicks every once in a while. Maybe go ahead and click it and see what it says. All right, this one says a person sitting at a table smiling, which is not terrible because that's kind of what I already put. It's AI generated. AI is typically not smart enough yet to fully determine what is in an image. So that button is not typically recommended. I just clicked on it for fun, but yeah, typically not recommended to use that generate for me.
Hey, Kathleen,
Yes.
just got a quick question. So, to that point, how the generated response said a person sitting at a table smiling, but there are other people within the photo. If if I was creating a photo that was advertising for a potluck and it had different type of cuisines on the picture, would I need to specify exactly what cuisine is what, or could I mark that as decorative?
That is a great question, and it's a very mushy answer. The thing with alt text is that it's extremely subjective to how you're using the image. So in this particular case, this image with a girl, there's some students in the background that I didn't even recognize. You know, if you have an image of just like a table with food on it, something as simple as like potluck table filled with dishes of food would be fine. If you are sort of highlighting the very specific dishes, like you're having a chili cook-off maybe, and you want to say a table filled with 7 different styles of chilies. So, you know, of chili dishes, so people understand that the chili is being highlighted. So it's very subjective on how the picture is being used. And to be honest, there's not really a specific right way, wrong way to do alt text. Just allowing someone who might not be able to see the image to get an idea of what is being portrayed in the image is the overall
Sweet,
like bottom line.
sweet. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for the question. And I've done hour-long presentations on alt text alone. So it's a kind of a deep rabbit hole. So I'm gonna stop there before we get too far down. But if anyone has any other questions about like specific instances or circumstances for using alt text, please feel free to reach out. All right, slide number 9. Again, the speaker notes talks about using the built-in layouts. Body text should be a minimum of 24 points. You don't want it too small because then it's hard to read. It might be difficult for people who have visual impairments, cognitive impairments as well. So be mindful of how much information you're putting on your slides and how small the font really is. If you want to duplicate a slide, you simply right click on the slide over here in the left-hand panel, and then we've got this duplicate slide option that will completely duplicate it with the speaker notes. So if there's an instance where you have speaker notes down here at the bottom and you want to, replicate the whole thing, you can just select duplicate slide from the right click menu options. For adding a slide, we come up here to the very top navigation and we're going to click on the Home tab. And then in this little second box-ish, we've got the new slide option. If you click on the little down arrow, you've got all of your different layouts. So you can select which option you want to add. If you simply click the bigger icon, it will just add whatever the last slide is, like whatever the slide you're on. It will add that same slide. If you highlight the slide itself, you can click on this top, this is kind of hard to describe, but we're in like the second little box here. We're in the very top little icon, and that is the layout icon, and that will switch the layout for the slide that you're currently on. So if we select the logo, we can switch it to the logo. We can switch it to completely different slides, and it will keep all of the content in there. Also, PowerPoint does this awesome thing where it tries to like suggest design for you, which I'm not a fan of. I don't like. Okay. Do we have any other questions so far about adding slides, master slides, changing layouts, anything of that nature? No? Okay. In the interest of time, we're going to keep on moving. All right, we're going to jump ahead just a little bit. Like I said, a lot of this is repeated information, how to update your image, body text, how to duplicate a slide. We're going to jump ahead to charts. Now, I will preface this whole thing by saying charts and graphs are yet another rabbit hole that is very easy to go down, and we could very easily do an hour-long presentation on those alone. So with that being said, we're not going to dive too deep. However, I do want to mention, I've seen lots of different PowerPoints that have screenshots or images of charts and graphs. Going back to what we talked about before with alt text, creating alt text for a complicated graph or chart is, well, complicated. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's not really recommended. So if you're going to have a chart, we definitely recommend like importing or not importing, using the interactive version. What I mean by that, we come up here to the Insert tab at the very top, and then we have this chart option. And if we go ahead and click on that, we have a whole lot of things we can select from. So you can have all kinds of different chart styles. You can make it 3D. Like, again, this is a whole thing. So anyway, we just want to pick one that you want. That will connect to an Excel spreadsheet that has all the data points in it. So we recommend using the interactive charts rather than like a screenshot. And if you have to build your own, that's okay. That's not terribly difficult to do. Again, this is something that I'm happy to connect with you on after the fact because we just don't have time to go into all of that today. So point number one on charts, use an interactive chart, not a screenshot. Point number two, be aware of color. Color contrast is very important, specifically for screen readers, for people with low vision or other visual impairments. So in order to change the color, sorry, first we have to unlock our graph. If we want to change the color on some of these bars, we highlight one of the data points and we can see all 4 of those are highlighted. And then we come up to format. Shoot, I got to remember where I am. Sorry, guys. Format data series. Okay, I have all these written down. Maybe I should just read my own instructions here. Change the colors in a chart. There we go. Double click on the element you wish to change. Hey, how about that, Kate? Read your own instructions. All right, so we double clicked on one of these bars, and now we have all of these options up here. Please know the default options are not always accessible. Like you might click on something and think, oh, it's default. It's got to meet all the standards. It doesn't always. So always be sure to sort of double check things. All right. Shoot, I keep off clicking it. We come up here to change color, and then you can select various colors. We have this as a pattern. If we come over here to the format data point, which opened when I double clicked it, click on the paint bucket fill, and then you can select pattern, and there's all kinds of different patterns that you can choose. And you can select the color for those patterns. Yellow against a white background is not typically accessible in the sense that it doesn't meet color contrast standards. So I simply added a black line border around that to make it separated a little bit more, to make it a little bit easier to see. And again, I just clicked on one of the yellow bars, which opens up this format data series, open up the border option. And then down here, you can select solid line. You can select the width of the border and the color of the border. And that sort of separates that from the background. Also in this template on this slide, which I added a slide. So this would have been slide number 12, I believe, in the original template. There is a link to the TPGI Color Contrast Analyzer. And I'm going to copy that and see if I can put it in the chat. That is not accessible that I just put in the chat. Why did that happen? Oh, I put 2 in. Okay. That link brings you to a tool that helps you assess the color contrast standards. And it's super easy to use. It shows you the foreground color and the background color and tells you what the contrast ratio is and whether that meets accessibility standards. Again, this is a whole nother discussion. Happy to talk through this on a little bit of a deeper level with anyone, or we can come back to this and answer some questions before today's session is out if we have some time. But I just kind of wanted to point out those few things about charts. Use the interactive chart as opposed to a screenshot or image. And then don't rely on the default options as being completely accessible. Always try to double check your colors. You can add patterns. You can add a border to sort of separate those out and make them a little more obvious, make them a little easier to read. All right, any initial questions about charts and graphs? This has been helpful. Great, Dorn, thank you. It's a lot. It's a lot to take in and it's a lot to understand, and there's a lot of little nuances that can be done. So I know people tend to use charts and graphs, which is why I like to point it out, but this is by no means like deep. This is extremely surface level. So I'm happy to go further into details and answer any other questions. The next slide is tables, which is essentially a lot of the same information, right? I've seen screenshots and images of tables. Again, providing alt text that adequately describes everything that's in the table or the chart or the graph is usually fairly difficult to do. So we recommend using the interactive table. And again, that's the same. Go to Insert. And then right here below the Insert tab, you can select Table, and then you can just establish how many rows and columns you want. Pop it on the page, and away you go. Under Table Design, this is the other thing that's important about tables. You always want to mark header rows and or header columns. So you can check the header row box, which then basically tells the software to format this top row in a way that screen readers will be able to determine that is a header row. That's helpful in allowing people using screen readers to adequately read the table. For the colors, I just clicked on the table, which brings up like this, the table design. And again, you kind of want to be careful with the colors because there's a lot of sort of ambiguity and they might be accessible, they might not, they might meet color contrast standards. You can use that TPGI color contrast analyzer to check if the font color meets the contrast standards against the background color. Some of these do not. So like this all green one, black on green definitely does not meet contrast standards. So just be aware of that. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions. And then once you're in the table, you can, type whatever you want to, fix it up, add your data points, and then just hit tab to move to the next cell. Tables should also be used for tabular data, not specifically layout purposes. I've seen a lot of tables that just, they kind of look pretty and, you know, they line information up so it's nice and neat, but that's not the best use of tables. Again, for screen reader purposes, it's a little more complicated for someone who's using a screen reader to listen to a table if it's not set up correctly. So lots of descriptions within the speaker notes on this slide, lots of instructions and a little more in-depth information. Helpful for when I have a presentation in December where you'll be using charts and tables. Yes, Vanessa, absolutely. And again, if you want to connect with me before that to kind of double check, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with tables and charts and accessibility, but I'm happy to connect with you and go into a little more detail about what it is that you're presenting and how you're presenting it. And also, again, I will mention all of these points are for when you're sharing a PowerPoint with other people, as opposed sharing directly, as opposed to doing like a general virtual meeting kind of thing. So that's a little bit of a different beast. There are different things that need to be considered. So Vanessa, if you're going to be sharing your PowerPoint directly with people, like emailing it to them, that's where most of this will come in. All right, let's see. We're going to skip over a couple of slides here because, again, a lot of this is repeated information. In this template, we have, we've allowed for icons, or we've included icons. Again, you can change these out if you want. The easiest way to do it is to highlight the icon or the image. All right, let me back up a little bit. Icons are technically images. So icons also need to have alt text. So if we go ahead and right click on one of these icons, now, as I talked before about alt text, these icons are simply filler, right? They don't really add a whole lot of additional meaning. They don't really have a whole lot of specific purpose. So these particular ones are marked as decorative. All right, we're going to close that out. Now, if we want to replace this, I have the icon highlighted. We can delete it. So now we have an empty icon box. In this slide deck template, down near the end, slide 28 or 29 or so, we have a whole lot of different icons that you can use. You can highlight one, copy it, go back to, what slide was I on? Go back to the slide that we were on, highlight the icon, and then if you paste it, it will put it in so it fits the dimension that's already there. So you don't have to worry about like resizing it or anything like that. And all of those instructions are in the speaker notes of a couple different slides within this deck. Again, if you want to upload your own, oops, you just select from device, or PowerPoint has a lot of really cool icons that you can search for. We wait for a second. You can type in like keywords of icons that you want to have represented, and then you can just select what you want and insert it, and it'll pop it right in. I use the PowerPoint icons quite a lot, actually, when I'm looking for fun little ways to spruce up my PowerPoint thing. Also, if we check the alt text on that, so a lot of the icons in PowerPoint will have a very brief alt text associated with them already. So you can either leave that there, or again, you can mark it as decorative. One thing that I didn't mention at the very beginning is, while using the slide layouts, we recommend not adding additional elements or components to the slides. The reason for that is that when screen readers read slides, it reads the elements in a very specific order. And when you add something new, it just kind of throws it in and doesn't take into account what order it's being read in. So this slide deck is very robust. It has a lot of different layouts. You can delete all that you want. If you don't want 4 of these boxes, you could delete a couple of these. That's okay. But we really recommend not adding a whole lot of things to the slides because that will mess up the reading order for a screen reader user. So instead of hearing image, title, objective 1, description, objective 2, description, right? That's a very generic way of what a screen reader user might be hearing. If you start adding elements, they might hear title, objective 1, picture, description, objective 2, objective 3, blah, 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 out of order. Thank you, Maddie. Yes, please feel free to contact me if you have any other questions. So the reading order in the slide is very important. So when you add things to it, it just kind of throws it in randomly and doesn't always make sense to someone using a screen reader. All right, we've got instructions on how to replace the icons, how to replace the image. We've gone through all that. Yeah, even though this slide deck is fairly robust and it has a lot of different layouts, as I mentioned, a lot of the information within the speaker notes section is repetitive. And I did that very much on purpose. So you would have the information needed on every slide that you want, hopefully. All right, let's see. We talked about individual titles, unique titles, not adding elements. We did go over adding slides. All right, does anyone else have any other questions so far at this time? Talked a little bit about color. Text and image. All right, again, replacing images, adding text. And you can update these numbers. I mean, anything that's in here was just put here for placeholder purposes. So you can update it to whatever you need to. Oh, I know what I was going to mention, the title box. To go along with the fact that every slide needs to have an individual unique title, the title box is different than the actual text box. A lot of times in PowerPoint and Google Slides templates, there are blank slides. Please don't use blank slides. All of the title boxes within this PowerPoint template are labeled as such. So you can delete whatever you want from the page, except please don't delete the title box. As I mentioned earlier, title boxes are important, important for sighted readers as they go through, but also important for screen reader users to kind of keep track of where they are within the presentation as they're listening to it through a screen reader. And title boxes are one of the ways that they do that. So whatever else you delete on a slide, please leave the title box and use that as your main title. And again, as I mentioned, all of the title boxes within this template are labeled as title. So you know, preferably not to delete it. Okay. Sometimes people have a lot of information. We're going to use this one as an example. Sometimes people will have a lot of information on a slide. And again, we want to make sure that the font doesn't go below 24, maybe 20. But if you have that much information on a slide where the font needs to be reduced, I would recommend duplicating the slide and splitting out the information, or simply reducing the amount of information that's in the slide itself. Typically speaking, when people when people have slide decks, right? You're sharing a slide deck with someone. A lot of times you might be talking through it with someone and people cannot read what's on the slide and listen to you talk at the same time. So if there's too much information on the slide, it becomes very distractive and disruptive. That's the word I'm looking for. And sort of takes away from the overall point of everything. So again, we want to be very mindful of how much information is put on individual slides and try to keep that to a minimum. You can use the speaker notes if you want to expand on points. You could also have like external documents. One thing that I learned in a presentation session workshop was to only have minimal bullet points on each of your slides, but then have a link to like a Google Doc that you could share with people that have more information written out. So if you want to expand more, or you can just use the speaker notes of the PowerPoint to put in additional information. So rather than trying to cram everything into one slide, find alternative ways to present that information to people. All right. Just kind of reviewing everything to make sure we're touching on all the points that I have in this template. Any questions from anyone so far? Links. Talk about links. Okay, I've not yet talked about links, so we'll talk about that real quick. When you are including a link, a URL, it is recommended, best practice, not to use the full, what I call naked URL, https:// whatever. Screen readers will read those full URLs character by character. So yeah, consider that. It's obnoxious enough as a sighted user if you're looking through something and you see all sorts of links that are just full and it's very disruptive. It's even more disruptive to people who are using screen readers when they come across that. So in the instance of like Google Docs, all right, well, let me go back a little bit. Ignore that. Don't use the full URL. You want to embed it behind text. So you want the clickable text to describe where the link is going to go. So homepage in and of itself is very vague. We want Oswego homepage. That clickable text tells people where the link is going to go. The other thing about screen reader users can hear link text out of context of all of the rest of the slide. So all that they're hearing is the clickable words. Thanks, Carlo, if you're still here. Thank you very much. Which means when you have links like click here, learn more, visit us, that wording is not helpful to screen reader users in particular because it's not telling the user where the link is going. So you want to avoid the full URL. You want to avoid very vague links like click here. You want the link text to be very short, very concise, but also tell the reader where the link is going to go. Okay, if you are presenting on screen, I've said a couple of times, sharing slide decks and materials with people directly is a little bit different than sharing virtually in a meeting type of setting. In this type of setting, if you have a virtual meeting with someone and you have a link that you want to share with them, rather than sharing the whole big long URL, consider using like a short.io or bit.ly. Try using a tool that will shorten the link a little bit so it's not quite so obnoxious and long. You guys right now watching this cannot click on any link that I put in here, right? So any meeting that you have where you're sharing a link with someone, they can't click on it unless you copy it and put it in the chat. So if you're sharing information with someone in a virtual setting and you want them to understand what that link is, the best way to do it is have it as a shortened link. So then they might be able to write it down or they can take a screenshot, they can copy it, something like that. Also, another best practice would be to put the link in the chat. That way they have it in multiple places. All right, and we are on slide, I think this would be slide 16 in the original template, and that talks all about URLs and what to do and what not to do. Any questions on links? No, I know we've had a couple people had to run. All right. Let's see here, talking about duplicating a slide, going back to body text, replacing the icons. All of this is sort of repeated information. All right, meet the team. Oh, look at that. I forgot I put that in there. Meet the team. This was, again, a number of images. When you have a headshot, the only alt text that you really need to put is the person's name. So you don't really need to be worried about what they're wearing or where they are or anything like that, just the person's name. Unless all of the other details are somehow important to that image. Like again, it's very subjective based on how you're using the image. Typically speaking, when you have a headshot of someone, you just want the people using, you just want your users to know that it's a representation of that person. All right, adding alt text. We've got our stats slide. This would be another really good example of why reading order would be important, right? Because if you have numbers in one text box and like an explanation, we'll say number of students. In another text box, if the actual number and the definition or explanation are being read not together, it's not going to make any sense to people. So reading order is very important, which again is why we ask not to add anything to a slide, but just kind of use what's there. Has anyone had any experience with reading order or the selection pane in PowerPoint?
I haven't, but I just had a quick question for clarity.
Yeah.
So in terms of reading order, so you have the title for stats, and then you have that number, and then underneath it is number of students.
Yes.
So I think what I heard you say earlier was, do we need to combine the two? So basically, if we put 685,000, do we hit enter and then write number of students so that it reads 685,000 students, or will it be out of order if they're in separate boxes, text boxes?
That's a great question. It's more likely to get out of order if they're in separate text boxes. So by all means, you could, I can delete that. You could just take the 685,000, hit enter, add in your thing, and then the
And
text,
then edit it.
you
Okay.
want to change the size of it because right now we have it to 80. In most text boxes, you can change the sizing of different content, right? So the 685 can stay the same, but then students will bring down to 24. And
Sweet. Okay.
that's in the way. So there's still a little bit of a gap there, but now it's in one text box. So no matter what else you do with the slide, those two things are going to be read together. That's a great question.
Sweet. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And there's not really, I don't know of any great benefit to having individual pieces in different text boxes as opposed to like putting them together, aside from maybe layout purposes or, some sort of aesthetics. But yeah. For reading order, and this again kind of goes down a little bit of a rabbit hole, so we're not going to go too far because we are cutting short on time, but if you're interested and want to explore reading order, if you come up to the very, very top and go to arrange, we have a selection pane option down at the very bottom. And if you open that, now we've got that open here on the right-hand side. This is how a machine will read the elements on the slide. And it reads it from bottom up, I believe. So this would read the image, then the title, and then the 685, and then the icon, then the next number, the description, the icon, 87, description, and then the footer and the slide number. And I must have added that or moved that. I don't remember what I did, but I must have thrown that out of order. So that proves my point, is that if this is just kind of stuck here on the end, it went through and read all of the other elements, and then it comes back and reads this one. So for a screen reader user, it might be like, well, what the heck is that last piece of information? Why is students just kind of hanging out there in left field? So again, this is something I'm happy to go through in a more in-depth basis for anyone who really wants to know. It's not terribly difficult, but it does get a little bit complicated if you're not used to, if you're not used to it. But anyway, that's where the reading order is, and it does play a very important part in how machines read or determine the information on individual slides. So Dorian, that was a great question. Thank you.
Okay, Kate, is there anything more that needs to be shown? I'm going to need to jump over to another meeting.
No, I think we are good. If everyone wants to go to that communications marketing page and download this particular template, you'll be able to see all the instructions that I've been going through. If you have any questions, please feel free to message me. Kathleen.deforest@oswego.edu is my email. So you're welcome to reach out, or accessibilitypractices@oswego.edu is the general accessibility work group email, and someone will get back to you with any other information that you need. So thank you all very much for coming. Hope this was helpful. Lots of information to absorb. Please feel free to ask questions, and good luck. Have fun. Enjoy building your slide decks.
Thank you kindly, Kate. You have a wonderful week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.